Good morning. Today we're joined by Chris Morgan. Chris is a KAATSU master. Chris is a KAATSU master instructor and the chief aquatic officer at KAATSU Global, which he'll discuss exactly what that means momentarily. But Chris, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here and excited to talk about KAATSU.
So before we talk about what being a CAO really is, first, what are some unusual or non-negotiables you've done so far today for your health and performance? I know it's not even 7 a.m. here yet, but perhaps you've done something.
For just today?
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's a great question. In fact, since I've really learned about the wonders of KAATSU, today I started off with some KAATSU cycles, and we can talk about that. But exercising without exercising would be a simple way to talk about it.
Yeah, and for some background, I first discovered KAATSU back in, must have been 2011, 2012, when I was training at a revolutionary gym. I think it was actually called Revolution Fitness. And the device seemed way out there back then. And then I discovered a knockoff version of a similar thing called blood flow restriction training in college and used that for a while. And then I started hearing in biohacking circles about KAATSU coming up again. So I'm really interested in digging into that today with you.
Yeah, it's, and that's really important because there are some real important differences between what we call BFR and KAATSU, and also some similarities that once you learn about it, it kind of sets the light bulb off like, oh, I get it now.
Yeah. Okay, so tell me about your background and how you got that interesting title.
Yeah, so I have a background in aquatics. Started I was a swimmer in college out in California. Continued my coaching career in coaching swimming at Stanford University back in the 90s under a famous swimming coach named Richard Quick. My career took me over to Europe. I spent 15 years in Switzerland, the later years as the national team coach of Switzerland. During that time in Switzerland, it's important to the story, I did my extended or second degree in human performance, specifically in human biomechanics, at a university in Switzerland as I was coaching. And I was always interested by things that were different, things that were, not necessarily toys of the trade, but more interesting things that were scientifically based protocols that used equipment. I then came back to the United States in 2012 and was at Harvard University. And that's where sort of the actual KAATSU experience or exposure happened on the pool deck at Harvard University, which everyone knows is a university with some smart people. And I met the then CEO of KAATSU Global, Stephen Munatonis. He was a swimmer, I was a swimmer, and I saw him putting these bands on one of the athletes at Harvard, one of the Olympic athletes from Harvard in 2012. And that for me was all I needed. I said, I want to know more. And that's when I was fully immersed into the world of KAATSU.
Yeah, and I think some people are going to have an idea of what KAATSU and blood flow restriction training are, what category of these fall under and how they work. But just because I know you've already rehashed this to death on a million other podcasts, can you give a brief overview of what it is, how it works?
KAATSU is a Japanese word for ka means additional and atsu means pressure. So additional pressure. We'll talk more about how it was developed by Dr. Yoshiaki Sato back in the 60s. So it's pneumatic bands. This is an armband, if I can show. This is one of our more current pneumatic bands. And it's contrary to what BFR is, which is not pneumatic bands. These are they stretch, they're elastic, and they have a very importantly designed air bladder inside of the band. We refer to it as a band, contrary to a cuff, which can be mistaken for a blood pressure cuff or a tourniquet. Mm-hmm. So really when people say, oh, KAATSU, you use a tourniquet, we say, no, we use a pneumatic elastic band. It's placed on the upper arm or on the upper leg. We never do both at the same time. Again, that's a subtle or actually maybe a very important difference between some people who do BFR and KAATSU. Then with appropriate pressures, and we can talk about that, with a small device that regulates very accurately the amount of pressure. We modify the blood flow distal to the band, and that's where the beauty of KAATSU happens.
So to summarize, you have these pneumatic bands, not cuffs,
Correct.
and you inflate them with air, and then you do specific types of exercise or not exercise, and then this causes different and importantly beneficial changes in the body.
Correct. So now a little bit to talk more about BFR. What some of the BFR products out there do, and from the $20 bands you can buy on, or straps, I'll call them, on Amazon, up to some of the more sophisticated medical grade tourniquets that also, and this is just, information that's out there. There are some very, very expensive FDA cleared tourniquets that can be used, that people then use for BFR. And that's a really important thing for people to understand. There's a really tricky way you can use verbiage and vocabulary. You can have an FDA cleared tourniquet that's used for BFR. Some people might think, oh, well, it's FDA cleared. What you have is you have a very expensive medical tourniquet that's used for BFR. And what BFR will do is will actually go to occlusion. I'm just going to use my hands to sort of, it makes sense, to actually occlude and go to the point where we occlude all arterial and venous flow, and then they will come off to find what they call, some people will use a term, limb occlusion pressure, to then allow the blood flow. KAATSU doesn't do that at all. What KAATSU does is we start from the exact opposite end. We have complete homeostasis, where we are, you and I, sitting here right now. And then with very specific protocols, after years and years and years and years of development by Dr. Sato in Japan at the University of Tokyo, with cardiovascular studies and cardiologists in Tokyo, they've learned with certain protocols just enough pressure to modify or moderate the venous flow. We then get in, this, what we call KAATSU, and we use very simple, it's the analogies I use with people. If you think of the movie The Karate Kid, and this might sound so unscientific, but when you think about karate and the thousands of years of development and wax on, wax off, wax on, wax off, it's a very similar way that Dr. Sato developed his science. Pressure on, pressure off, pressure on, pressure off, and very specific protocols to find this state of KAATSU, which is the correct coloration in the skin distal to the band, the correct sensation that the practitioner of KAATSU will have, and even a pulsation. Just as we get to the appropriate pressure, one will feel a slight pulse, as you would when you have your blood pressure taken. When the nurse or the doctor starts to back off of the occlusion pressure, you'll start to feel your pulse. Yeah. So we go from the other extreme. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. And again, to summarize for listeners, the main difference between KAATSU and traditional blood flow restriction bands is that the BFR bands do not have any bladder. You don't inflate them at all. They're just static bands that you put on and may have a little bit of elasticity to them, but they're missing that core component.
So yes and no. So with some of the BFR straps that are non-pneumatic, yes, but there are some medical grade tourniquets that do have different versions of air bladders. And then what's really important to know is the difference between a narrow cuff and a wide cuff. Some of the tourniquets will have very wide cuffs, and that's important if you want to occlude. KAATSU has very narrow cuffs, or narrow bands. We don't consider them cuffs at all. Narrow bands, again, so that we do not occlude. These are not by mistake, the narrow size. These are after, hundreds of studies, thousands and thousands of sessions of KAATSU in Japan, that the narrow band is what we want. So though there are some BFR devices out there that do have air bladders and do use compressors in their device. But I know what sets KAATSU apart is the narrow bands, the cycle feature that we have that we can talk about, which is very important to KAATSU, and all of the protocols and scientific journals that are out there, the studies on KAATSU.
Mm-hmm. We'll touch on some of the use cases and exactly who uses it in a minute. Can you walk us through the mechanisms of how it works?
Yeah, so by placing this pneumatic band, again, on the upper arm, and I can even demonstrate as I'm talking. We'll place the band on the upper arm. The reason why we're placing it just above the bicep, just above the tricep, and people will always ask, well, how tight do we have it? And we simply use one finger. So if one finger can be placed between the band and the arm, that's a good starting place. We will always start with the cycle. So the KAATSU cycle is pressure on, pressure off, pressure on, pressure off. The pressure is on for 30 seconds. There's a 5-second release. The second time the 30-second pressure is applied, it's a little bit more pressure. Our pressure that we use is called SKU, standard KAATSU units. And that is the pressure inside of the air bladder. It's not the pressure that's inside of your arm or your leg or inside of your body. And once we train people to understand what those pressures are, the cycle will increase for 8, what we call steps, 30 seconds on. So you're looking at a little bit over 4 minutes. And what we're doing is we're warming up the vascular tissue. We're engorging all of the vessels with blood. So it's kind of the analogy I've used. There's different analogies. You want to think of the small roots of a tree that are reaching for water, and we're engorging those capillaries with blood. And then we're releasing. Then we're engorging them again. So it's allowing all of the vascular tissue to be engorged with blood. What happens then is an entire cascade of signals and events and hormone releases. VEG1, adrenaline, all of the things that are happening in regular exercise. The common mistake that people make is, well, it's only happening distal to the band. No, it's systemic. So it's happening throughout the whole body. So we're really using the arm or the legs as a vehicle or a area of the body to then release this. It's happening in my brain, right? So just by simply using the arm or the leg, we're having an entire systemic effect. And really, there's a release of endothelial cells that, a lot of diseases and a lot of things that we're trying to avoid with aging, right? Simple. And you as a biohacker, we are looking for the ultimate biohack. So by doing this, it's kind of, I consider it a fountain of youth. I know I have the gray beard right now trying to grow a beard, but as a 50-year-old, I feel very fit, very healthy. All I do is KAATSU cycles. I don't even exercise. I don't have time. So by simply exercising my vascular tissue, I'm having a lot of beneficial biohacking events from just this pressure on my arm.
Do these cycles get the same beneficial release of nitric oxide and lactate accumulation in these, or is that only during exercise itself?
Both. So the cycles and exercising. So what we teach a lot of people, let's take I'll avoid the case studies, but in general, just by doing the cycle, you are exercising it's when we think of exercise, or when a layperson, and I'll consider myself not an expert, a layperson, when you go up to a layperson and say, all right, I want you to exercise. What are you going to do? I'm going to go for a run or a walk. My mother, who's in her 70s, for her exercise is walking on the treadmill. A young athlete in college, you say exercise, they'll consider, I'm going to go in the gym. I'm going to do bench press. I'm going to do leg press. I'm going to do squats. With KAATSU or with BFR, we're starting to get into a new way of thinking of exercise where we're exercising the vascular tissue, the veins and arteries that are inside of our body. It's kind of the connection between the muscle in the weight room and the heart and lungs out on the treadmill, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. So after you do the cycle, then you're warmed up. Is it fair to think of it as a warm up?
Definitely. And what we've found, again, with these two extremes of athletes, the 65-year-old obese diabetic or the young Olympian, like we recently saw all the talk about BFR and the athletes, definitely a new kind of warm up. And what I've found, and it's a lot of anecdotal stuff that you think one anecdotal story turns into 10, turns into hundreds, is these athletes are finding that their dynamic warm up is a lot more, they feel more alert. They have better tactile feel. I've spoken with swimmers who say their feel in the water, feel for the water is better, or professional baseball players, their grip on the ball feels better. And, that's right. We talk about all of this stuff in, excuse my voice, Major League Baseball with using things to have a better feel or better grip on the ball. Well, if they're just doing KAATSU and they have a better grip on the ball because all of that vascular tissue in their fingers has been, it's awake. So yes, has answered your question.
Okay. And because of these diverse populations you're using KAATSU with, it must be pretty safe.
Very safe. So that's another thing that is, because there are some, I would say some, I'm not going to say unsafe, but some unstudied, what I would say versions of straps or bands that are on the market that don't use the equipment or protocols of KAATSU. Those would be unsafe just because we don't even know what they do. Put a strap on your arm as tight as you can. You could get into some nerve damage. Well, because KAATSU has hundreds and thousands of studies of safe usage, it's incredibly safe if you follow the protocols. And the protocols are very simple. It's use our equipment, use our protocols. We also have some very, it's like when you go to the amusement park, if you're pregnant, don't ride this roller coaster ride. We have very similar, we actually don't promote KAATSU for pregnant women. We do promote for after they have birth, to maintain, to maintain hypertrophy or for simply getting back fit again after birth. But hydration, we promote people to be hydrated. We promote people to, if they do have any known heart conditions, to consult their doctor before they do KAATSU. So very simple, not just, strap in and, go the highest SKU or into a 1 hour workout with the KAATSU bands on. Very safe if you follow our protocols. We have not had personally, I have done KAATSU on over 1,000 people. Never once. We do, people who don't follow protocols maybe have had some small incidents of feeling faint, but then when we back off, oh, you didn't follow this protocol. So otherwise, very, very, very safe.
Okay. So now let's talk about some of the ways it's used, because it's safe, it's used by all kinds of different people, but then let's get into the nuts and bolts. Like, say I wanted to use it, I guess I can think of like 3 different use cases, like rehabilitation of an injury, performance enhancement, and then also recovery. And so if you want to go through some either case studies or how you'd use it in those situations, that'd be great.
Perfect. So let's start with rehabilitation, because that's where we've seen a lot of KAATSU and BFR out in the industry today. So with rehabilitation, and specifically, I'm going to talk about KAATSU, is a physical therapist, a doctor, a chiropractor can use KAATSU in many, many different ways. For me, the way to think of it is it's sort of an added protocol to what they're already doing. So with a physical therapist, let's talk about 2 different cases. They're rehabbing someone with an elbow injury. So for there, the reason I want to talk about elbow is, again, the layperson will think, okay, well, that's distal to the band. Or they're rehabbing a knee injury and they're using the KAATSU leg bands. So I'm going to talk about that, and then I'm going to really blow some minds with saying, well, it doesn't even have to be distal to the band, because this is a systemic effect from using KAATSU. So what that physical therapist would do is use the KAATSU cycle, only the cycle. Before they're going to do any of their PT work on that patient, they can start with the KAATSU cycle. What they're going to then do is engorge that vascular tissue distal to the band where the injury is, and start to promote and enhance and fast forward some of the healing for that injury. Whether it was an injury that was first rehabbed with surgery, Tommy John surgery for a baseball player, an ACL or MCL for a professional athlete, or even, the common or the athlete at home, the 55-year-old who was out walking their dog and tore their ACL, but they fell. So they're going to use the KAATSU cycle, pressure on, pressure off, pressure, doing nothing else, then performing their normal PT exercises. It's kind of like a supercharge to what they're doing. And I can tell you, study after study after study, the healing is exponentially elevated or put in the fast forward mode. And that's what everyone wants, right? We're all about time management. Now let's talk about somebody who has an injury that's not distal to the band: lower back, pec, shoulder, neck, hip. Again, KAATSU cycles, because then you got to remember this is a systemic effect. So all of those good, again, layperson, all of those good human juices that are out there flowing through the body are going to be elevated, so that as we're doing our PT exercises, the body is going to be in a better state for repair and healing because of the KAATSU cycle. We've had some chiropractors who've taught us that they'll use the constant state pressure. So that's where we also have a feature that you can place air, the appropriate pressure, and then they'll do some small adjustments or manipulations with pressure on. So it's kind of like they're finding a way to turbocharge their own knowledge. So whatever they've normally doing on their patient, they're able to have an added positive effect to what they're already doing. We have a lot of doctors, medical doctors, surgeons who will, prescribe KAATSU, post-surgery, 1, 2, 3 days. And we even on our website have case studies of even post-surgery, and this can blow a lot. And I've seen it, that someone with an ACL, and that's quite a total knee replacement. That's a good example. You know what's been beneficial to using KAATSU? The scar tissue is the scar tissue heals. There's a lot of one thing, and again, I'm not a medical doctor on skin, but ceramide, which is something really important to the body and skin, the amount of ceramide that's flowing through the body increases, and the scar tissue, rather than being a real puffy scar on the knee, could be very flat. And that, for a lot of people, is really important. Some people like the scars, right? They have like the battle scars. So, they might say, I don't want to, use KAATSU. I want to have that scar. But I would say the majority of people would like that scar to heal. So that's the rehabilitation. A lot of rehab, and even some of the, again, anecdotal feedback that, there's a lot of things that we've learned from Dr. Sato in Japan, that just by people who are learning, traumatic brain injuries or traumatic TBI, people using KAATSU and coming back, there's a whole world out there that we're finding every day. We're learning that there's a lot of neurological feedback. You're engorging that vascular tissue. That's going to affect the nerves in that vascular tissue. And there's a lot of, awakening that's happening. Again, we're learning every day. People with Parkinson's, this is, again, a little bit off the topic of rehab, but if you're rehabbing someone with Parkinson's, and this is not curing Parkinson's, but if they're using KAATSU and they can drink coffee, going from this to drinking coffee like this, I tell you what, they're going to say, I want to do KAATSU. So again, I'm not saying we can cure Parkinson's, but we've had many, many, many anecdotal that's starting to be, well, is it still anecdotal or is this proof? And that's where we're going in our, the next decade of KAATSU studies is on rehabbing people, not only with sort of the known things, but more of the very complex rehabilitation scenarios. People that are rehabbing from an amputation. We recently, even on our Instagram, have stories of a young man who was using KAATSU after amputation, and he was blown away with how his robotic arm, he was able to feel like the nerves at the end of his, what he called his stub, were firing that robotic arm. I mean, for that guy, what an amazing story. So that would be the rehabilitation. The next thing I would talk about is the performance. And there again, you take your athletic trainers, your coaches, your sports scientists. I say we because we feel involved, just recently within days, the German bobsledding team won 2 gold medals in the 2-man bob and the 4-man bob. And they are working with a sports scientist in German, training with KAATSU. So using the bands and I'll give a perfect example. You imagine the bobsledders, they're in the weight room, right? You have the driver and you have the 3, all they're doing is pushing that sled, and those sleds weigh a lot. Yeah. I don't know, I would be misquoting, but I think the 4-man bobsled is over 1,000 pounds.
Oh, wow.
It's a very heavy sled. So those guys, they recruit a lot of track and field runners, right, to be bobsledders. That's where you get the Jamaican bobsledders that came from track and field. So their whole goal. So imagine now you can create an environment where they can do sports-specific movements with the KAATSU bands on, not in the weight room. So putting the bands on, constant pressure, pushing the sled with that hype, that what you talked about earlier. We talk about lactic acid. Well, really, lactic acid is a fuel. We're learning more and more in the biohacking world that, lactic acid really isn't as bad as we thought it was, but it's incredibly difficult for the human body. So that's where we talk about lactate tolerance training. So let's say now a bobsledder can put the bands on and do sports-specific movements, go out and push the sled with the KAATSU bands on. A swimmer can work on starts off the blocks, wearing the bands on their legs with no weight, not weight bearing, so they can do probably the most sport-specific movement. And most recently, I've been working with track and field athletes, short sprints, KAATSU bands on their legs or even their arms, working on speed for arms. I apologize, I'm not a track runner, so I'm not doing it well. But you can do the most sport-specific movements. And I will tell you, every top athlete or lay athlete working on the treadmill, I love it because you see it, they smile with pain. That's what I call it. And it's not uncomfortable pain. It's like, wow, that's how I feel when I'm in my ultimate sprint or my ultimate walk or my ultimate push or my ultimate jump. Basketball, track and field, swimming, water skiing, any sport you can think of, you could do it with the KAATSU bands on, with that constant pressure. That would be the performance. I apologize if I talk too much on that.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is that in my memory of using the KAATSU for performance, it was a similar thing when I put the bands on, and instead of taking forever to accumulate enough lactate so that I would actually feel the incredible burn, it would be vastly shortcut. So I could put that
Correct.
on and then within minutes or seconds get to the same place that would take me an entire workout to get previously.
Exactly. And that's what you're doing. And again, we always have people smarter than us, right? You're smarter than me, and then we have people smarter than the two of us. But what you are doing is you are, this is a biohack. If I were to say differently, I wouldn't be, speaking honestly. But a biohack is it's a way to get somewhere differently, right? And so when you experienced in the weight room, let's talk about bench press, right? What do we try to do? We add weight, we add repetitions, and really we are wavering on where do I have to be careful that I'm not going to injure myself, right? And you've seen it, right? We've all seen in the weight room. I've seen people doing just simple deadlifts drop the bar because they tore their bicep right off the bone, right? And why did they do that? It's not because they were, there could have been some structural, something structural in their own body from birth that they didn't know about, that their tendon maybe wasn't as attached as the guy next to them as well, or simply it was too heavy and gravity was their enemy. But with KAATSU, we can avoid some of that gravity, and we can, just like you said, we can get to our end goal as far as building muscle. And again, the studies are out there on the hypertrophy, the muscle gain you can have. I wouldn't be able to speak to the, you know, as a professional biohacker, and I know you, and I've read a lot of your stuff and listened to you. You are the expert on that, on how hypertrophy. Yeah, with this band, with the protocols, you can, without the connective tissue tearing, the bone grinding. Those are the words I use with people, because those are the words, oh yeah, I don't want to tear any connective tissue. I'd rather get to my end game. So yes.
What I'd say the biggest enemy to long-term progress in terms of strength or hypertrophy is simply injury. And so if you can minimize the chance of injury while still maintaining or gaining, then you're going to last a lot longer, and you're going to end up in a much better place than the person next to you who's able to put up a little more weight, but then comes down with a torn bicep or whatever.
Exactly. If you have someone who is lifting traditionally, or someone who's lifting weights to be stronger, even a bodybuilder using KAATSU, maybe the person next to them is going to be 1% stronger, but the person using KAATSU is going to be 35% healthier with their vascular tissue. An unfortunate thing in the bodybuilding world is, we know a lot about the use of anabolic steroids, and anabolics. Look, it's poison for your body, right? There's a lot of risk that's taken. Yeah, you gain muscle, but if you are a clean bodybuilder and you're using KAATSU, well, you're also going to be healthier. Your vascular tissue, you are. The list can go on of the benefits that you are going to have, even if you're maybe 1% weaker or 1% less muscle tone than somebody, but you're going to be much healthier and not have any consequences later in life.
Yeah. I cut you off. There's a third facet.
So yes. So the third facet, and I apologize, any of the rabbit holes I do go down. The third would be recovery. And for me, this is the thing that's really the now, is recovery for athletes. And that's why we're reading about this. That's why we see, I think it was in the 2012 or 2016 Olympics, the big trend for athletes was cupping, right? Wow, what are these marks on Michael Phelps's back? And, in the recent Olympics, what are these bands on everyone's arms? So for recovery, we have cupping, we have sauna, we have red light, we have ice, we have, all kinds of things out there. But what's great about all of them is they're bringing attention to recovery. So recovery, all you have to do with KAATSU, bands on your arms, bands on your legs. Now, which one? I tell people both. We have a track and field athlete that we worked with a lot of the medal winners in Tokyo. We're using specifically KAATSU, and using it for what for us sets us apart, and really we are the gold standard in recovery, is the cycle. Pressure on, pressure off. You sit on your bed in a hotel if you're traveling or you're a professional athlete, or if you're sitting at home as an athlete in your own, just trying to get healthier. Cycles are the key. Pressure on, pressure off. And what you're doing is you're engorging not only that vascular tissue, but you're engorging the tissue distal to the band. And then when it releases, you have that metabolic flush of any metabolic waste from whatever you've done, whether it's walk on a treadmill or, sprint to a silver medal at the Olympics. So it is, and really that's what most of these products that are out there are designed for recovery, is just to enhance, stimulate, or promote lymphatic and circulatory flush. So with KAATSU, it really is. And what's really cool for me is to see the difference between, let's say, someone who's doing an ice bath. And I'm not saying don't do an ice bath. What I tell people that like ice bath, I say, do an ice bath and then do KAATSU. Do a massage and then do KAATSU. Do your the boots that people will wear. I won't say one or the other because there are a lot of products, and then do KAATSU. And what happens, I see time and time again, they're like, well, I really want to do KAATSU because they might not feel it in the now, but they feel it the next day. My wife, for example, I'm going to call her a recovery athlete. She would kill me if I said she's not an athlete, but she works in retail. She's on her legs 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
It took me a lot of years to convince her to do it. But after a long Black Friday, she said, can I try it? She tried it the next day. She's like, well, okay, maybe it was just that one time. And now she does KAATSU all the time because the next day she feels recovered in her legs. And that's her exercise.
Yeah, like you were saying, I think those metabolic waste products, I say waste because in the quotations, because I don't think they're actually waste, but those have like really potent brain and body boosting benefits. They're like, I've heard them dubbed Miracle Grow for the brain and body, and we cannot discount them.
And I'm glad you said that. So for us, and what we believe in for the recovery is you're turbocharging your recovery by just getting things to get into that tissue and then come back out, and then get back into that tissue and get back out. And really, when I don't think I've had, in the thousands of people I've done KAATSU with, this cycle, I can't tell you one time where I haven't had someone say, I don't want to do that again. Sometimes they'll be like, ooh, that was tight. But can I try it again? That's usually what I get.
I'm going to call it a cellular massage.
I love that. That's exactly what it is. It is a cellular massage, and down to the mitochondrial level. We have a mitochondrial, and that's what we're doing a lot of studies with too. We have some really incredibly smart people working with us studying KAATSU, and a lot of neat things will be coming out that we'll certainly share with you. Research papers specifically studying the KAATSU cycle.
What are some of the other things that you guys are studying?
So I'm glad you asked. We have a paper that's published. I will share it with you, Nick. It's actually a published paper out of Spain and the UK, specifically studying KAATSU and KAATSU cycle on jet lag, and how they have shown that you can help the effects of jet lag by just using the KAATSU cycle. Resetting, again, we'll use a lay term, resetting your circadian rhythm with the KAATSU cycle. So, and so we have a published paper on that reset of, or I won't say the reset of the circadian rhythm, but the KAATSU cycle has helped with jet lag. So if you think of, again, a business pair, let's not use a professional athlete. Let's use a business person who's traveling the world and going to different time zones and constantly plagued by sleep, whether they can't sleep or they're sleeping in the middle of that really important meeting. KAATSU cycles, we've got an article for you that says, use this in flight and then when you arrive at your new time zone. The larger the time zone, the better this is going to help. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. I love these kinds of things because with KAATSU, when you use the cycles, then you're distributing blood and oxygen to the brain. And whether or not you're a physical athlete, we all can use a little cognitive boost. And this sounds like it's the perfect thing, whether or not you're an athlete.
Correct. And, and we've had, and I know you as one of the leading biohackers is, we've also had some of the real names out there in biohacking who've said what you just said. It's that cognitive, when I do KAATSU this morning, as I told you, I feel more alert. I feel like I wake up a little bit quicker. Also, I sleep better. So, cognitive health, we'll call it, is also something that is so important that we're studying, with mental health, right? If you can help your mental health by cycling, who knows what the limits are, right? Limitless with KAATSU.
You correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that because it's low impact, it's going to have less impact on your stress hormones like cortisol, norepinephrine, and because of that, it's going to be more restorative than something like a long run at max heart rate or even a long hit session.
Very much so. Now, and again, those things are all so good, and it depends. But what I think would set KAATSU apart from like hit training is that, it's the subtlety of it. When it's so subtle and so, yeah, like you said, that cellular massage, I really love that. We're gonna have to talk about if we're gonna have to agree to some terms with you on that. Good. That's where you're gonna get the benefits, is that real subtle health.
And I'm not saying that this is a replacement for traditional weight training, but
Correct.
at the same time, so many people have the problem of overdoing it and under recovering, which leads them to burnout and lots of physiological problems over the long term. So if they can swap out one of those workouts per week with this instead and gives their body that time to actually fully recover, that could be a game changer.
Right. And I like how you said that. But there are, and we've seen it in a lot of the injuries out there, right? And when you think of a baseball player who has a Tommy John's, or they require Tommy John, it's simply when you see what they're doing with a baseball, or, we talked about the 55-year-old who's, a little bit overweight and out for walking their dog, and then they injure themselves with doing something that they need to do. So when you said overdo it and under recover, I think with KAATSU, you correctly do it and over recover.
Yeah, and that's a good problem to have. I have a handful more questions for you.
Yes.
But first, one thing that I noticed, we've talked mostly about the systemic benefits of KAATSU and using it on the arms. You've demonstrated that. But then why would, the benefits are fully systemic, why would you ever want to use it on your legs? Is there also like a stronger local effect?
Yeah, there is. So, and I'm actually just getting out the unit so people can see, how convenient it is. Our our current model, and I know you probably asked me about some upcoming stuff. We call it the C3. It stands for Cycle 3. So it's just a very small, and a lot of neat technology in there. You just hook up tubes for your left or right limb. You can also, we have small plugs that for people with injuries, you just plug one hole and you can use just one limb. For people with injuries, just trying to cycle. And again, we can, on our website, on our blog, you can see all kinds of the injury cases. But yeah, so there is a local. So if you, let's just say you're working on performance and you put the leg bands on and you do simple quarter squats, and we always encourage people to do non-locking quarter squats. So just really, so you're constantly engaging the muscles distal to the band. So if you have the legs on, I can't tell you the number of times, even with Navy operators, Navy SEALs that, sir, yes, sir. And I tell them, I bet I can put enough pressure on so you can't do 20 quarters. And they say, sir, I bet I can, sir. And then you see them fail at 17 air squats, no weight, non-weight bearing, because there's so much, lactic acid or lactate in the muscles distal to the band. So there is that local, or bicep curls. I still have the band on. I've been doing KAATSU now for 20, 30 minutes, and all I have is a base pressure on. Now, I would never encourage anyone to have it on this long, but my vascular tissue is so trained that I can handle it. And I couldn't in the beginning. So I've seen in the 8 years I've been doing KAATSU, my vascular tissue, I'll go up against anyone except Dr. Sato. So yeah, so to answer your question, there is a very local, and that's the beauty of KAATSU. That's the beauty of the athletic trainers. That's the beauty of a lay person, is teaching us teaching them. What are you doing? What can you do with KAATSU for the local? What it's kind of, and that's what we say to people. What do you want to do? And when they tell us, then we create, and that's where it's so great. You can do hundreds of thousands of different things with KAATSU. Swim, walk, jump, sit.
I just realized that we haven't even gone over a basic like programming. Like how would you incorporate this into your workout, or how would you do a KAATSU workout?
Great question. So I think for, I'm sure a lot of your listeners who are biohackers and also want to be fit, let's just say it's someone who wants to do their own gym session. Start with a cycle. Arms or legs is a good question. Are you a cat or a dog person? Are you an apple or an orange? I think it depends on what you're going to do that day. If you're going to have an arm day, you probably want to do a cycle on your arms. If you're going to have a leg day, on your legs. And that's just more a little bit of common sense. But it wouldn't be wrong to do a leg cycle and then do warms. Again, you're getting that systemic release. So start with a cycle, 1 or 2 cycles. A cycle is there are 8 steps in a cycle, so it's a little over 4 minutes. And with our device, you can do up to 6. You can program it for 6 cycles, which would be about 25 minutes. But we encourage 1 or 2, 4 to 10 minutes. And then you could, if you have a routine of, bicep curls and then, push-ups and then maybe some ropes, you could have it in the cycle mode. And while it's cycling, we even have people that they'll perform their exercise as it's 30 seconds of pressure, and then 5 seconds will go to the next. So they actually have been using the 30 seconds to decide what they do. Again, it's a little bit changing the way you do things. Or you can put it in the constant mode, which is a constant pressure. And the beauty is with these special nozzles that, unfortunately have been used by some other BFR products. That's fine to use a constant pressure. We were the original on that. Is you can untether, we call it untethered, and then you don't have the tubes in your way, and you can have a constant pressure. We encourage people to do no more than 15 minutes on the arms, 20 minutes on the legs, and that's from the protocols of Dr. Sato. People say, well, why? Because you don't need more. If you do it correctly, after 15 minutes, you're done. You're done. You physically can't do more because you have created such a state of hypoxia in that muscle distal to the band. And again, you take them off, and it's like, it's like when you take off compression socks, or when you when a swimmer will take off one of those high tech suits. It's like, that release of it feels so good. So that would be the protocol, is to do what you want to do that day with the KAATSU bands on. And then guess what? You can do it one more time, or you can do a cycle to recover. So you've gone on, you've used KAATSU on an assault bike, right? On your legs. And we've seen people go to failure, absolute failure. And it's neat because you see their face and they're like, oh, wow, I've never felt that before. And what they realize is it wasn't that the resistance was different. It wasn't that they had weights on. It was that they had this pressure or this change in their homeostasis that they've never felt before. So that was probably a long-winded answer to your question. That would be, a simple change, or a simple, let's do the workout you usually do, but let's do it with a cycle to start. And then, not right away, but a few times, I would say 4 to 6 to 8 sessions of just doing the same session with the cycle until you start to condition your vascular tissue to that pressure. Like with anything, you have to get used to it. And again, I've seen people say, I never want to do that again. You know what? Can I try that again? And then because it's what they feel after. 1 hour after, 1 day after, you can get quite sore from KAATSU, but it's a different soreness. People say, well, what do you mean? Well, you haven't done that connective tissue tearing, but you have some swelling after.
Yeah.
But I would say that you take that 48-hour soreness from a traditional weight workout. It seems to be a little bit earlier, the soreness, but it goes away much quicker.
Mm-hmm. My own experience has definitely mirrored that.
Yeah. And yeah, you feel it.
Yeah.
You feel it.
Okay, and how about stacking this with some other protocols? Like for me, I know that I like to combine it with something called, I guess, Doug McGuff's super slow strength style training. And it's like really long and slow reps where you never completely lock out. You always have some tension on the muscle. And those two combined is like dynamite. It's a brutal workout. But have you heard of people combining this with either that or training with elastic bands or anything along those lines?
Yep, definitely. So again, and that's the beauty of it. You can add it to anything that you already know works for you, that you believe in, or that you want to try. Everything in moderation. So again, you wouldn't want to put the highest pressure on the KAATSU bands and go beyond, our protocol times, which 15 minutes of constant pressure on the arms, 20. But everything in moderation and starting to learn how you can add it to those things. So just like you spoke about, back in the 90s when I was coaching at Stanford University, I was really, really fortunate that a lot of people came through that university. And I had a young man named Mike Pigg, who was one of the pioneers of triathlon. And this was before I even knew about KAATSU. And he was working with Phil Maffetone on low heart rate training. So I went out on the track with him and I wanted to improve my, I was retired from swimming, but was a young coach in swimming at Stanford. But I wanted to started to do a little bit of triathlon, and I went out on the track with Mike, learning the protocols of Phil Maffetone, low heart, and so I had a polar heart rate, and I was walking, and he said, "Yeah." I said, "But I'm not running." He goes, "Yeah, you are. You're walk run." So it's really understanding that. And now when I think back, I could have done some slow walking with KAATSU on. So anything that you have, and just like you said, elastics or surgical tubing, plyometric training, anything you do, you can do it with KAATSU on, and it will take it to the next level. You think back to, right? It's my analogy for a lot of people, it sounds funny, but, if you've seen, you might be too young, but, Spinal Tap, there's this famous scene where they take it to 11, and it's like every volume control on every stereo goes to 10, right? But in Spinal Tap, it's a comedy. They take it to 11. So for me, KAATSU is taking your training to 11.
Yeah. I found a cool system called the Harambe system. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's kind of like the X3, but made to withstand up to 1,000 pounds of force. And it's basically a Olympic style barbell, heavy duty layered latex bands, and then a nice big foot plate that's made out of like a non-stick material. And you can really get some heavy loads there, and it's great for at home. So it sounds like combining both this system and the KAATSU system together can be like an ultimate workout. One thing I think I remember from previous research I did is that it's best suited for higher rep workouts. You wouldn't want to do a 1 rep max with KAATSU.
No, and that's exactly, that's a good point. We do use reps in your classic gym training. And what's really important is we teach people to go to failure with the KAATSU bands on. So again, if you're using arms, going to failure, and it's hard for people to accept failure, because if they're used to doing 30, 15, 15, 15, or whatever protocol you're using of classic weight training or gym training, to then have them use the bands, find that appropriate pressure, increase the SKU, and they fail, they feel like they've failed. But we say in the KAATSU world, failure is success. If you go, not failure, but if you go to failure.
Well, that's one of the things is that traditionally with most working out, if you don't have these bands on, when you hit failure, to actually fully recover takes a long time. Like in a lot of cases, even for the young and well-trained, it can take many days, like more than your 1 or 2 days, like a lot of people think. I've seen research that shows it can take up to as long as a week. So I think from this conversation, one of my big takeaways is the true power of the cycle, because I've been a BFR user for a long time because it's simply the poor man's KAATSU, and it's easy to have. I can get them for friends because they're like 20, 30, $40. KAATSU is a much bigger investment, but it seems like it's the more proven way to go, especially if you can be sitting there watching TV, running a cycle, warming up, instead of having to get out there and run around for a while. You can do that and then get onto your workout. But so tell me about your devices you have available, because when I first started looking into KAATSU, there was a different device, and now I see a newer one. And then as we talked offline that KAATSU is releasing another device soon.
Correct. Yeah, so just a quick history, and not to bore the audience, but the original device invented by Dr. Sato was, we laugh, it looked like a James Bond sort of silver briefcase that you open up and has some kind of the evil doer is gonna blow up the world with it. It was quite large, sort of an attaché case. Then when Stephen Munatonis, our CEO, who has been the engineer and the brains behind everything, he developed the KAATSU Nano, which was in the sort of 2014, 2015. It was about this big, looked like a small, like a GPS device. And then we had a quick transition to the Cycle unit, the Cycle 2.0, which was quite small, about the size of our now C3. And I apologize for my camera. So this is our current model, the C3. Again, that's the third generation. And it does a lot. This is a pretty mighty little device. It's about the size of a pager. When I was a kid, I had a pager. It's about half the size of a standard cell phone. And what we're releasing very soon is what we're calling the B1. It simply will have the compressors and all the technology on a small. I don't have the product in front of me, but you can see it. You can actually see it advertised online already. It's about the size of a 9-volt battery, and it'll be built into the bands, both arms and legs. And you can order just the device. It will be Bluetooth technology, so controlled by your phone, both Android and iPhone. That's the final piece we're working on right now, is the software. It will record. There will be tons of intelligence with this Bluetooth technology that will keep track of everything on your phone, the correct pressures, what you're doing. You will also be able to sync it up with, we've cooperated or collaborated with Massimo. I don't know if you're familiar with the Massimo pulse oximeter, which keeps track of SpO2, heart rate, and those kind of things. So it's really cool, the amount of technology that will be just on your phone. You'll have no more tubes. You'll be able to cycle and use a constant pressure. You'll be able to have several users with one device also. So that's going to be, and in addition to that, we're introducing sometime the middle of this year, 2022, a new master unit. And that's definitely for the clinical, the physical therapist office, the hospital, maybe the sports scientist who has a lot of athletes and is very more thinking of recording information. It'll be an more expensive unit, but definitely in the clinical environment. And that's the next generation of our master unit. So those are the two devices coming out. The B1 is we're days away, and the master unit a little bit later this year.
Great. And I will have a link to all this in the show notes. And the KAATSU team has generously agreed to give all Mind Body Peak Performance listeners a discount if you use code URBAN. Chris, do you remember what the discount is?
You know what? We'll have to put that on. That's unfortunately not my department.
I don't remember the exact details of the discount, but that will all be in the show notes.
It's a good discount. So I know that they'll get, certainly it'll be a big savings that only they'll be able to receive.
And I think that I'm going to have to wait until the new unit drops to get my own.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really, I think it'll be a game changer for not only for us, but for everyone who wants to, take their training to a new level, and really, again, you're increasing, or you're improving your vascular health with actually not even realizing you're doing it, which is kind of a neat feature.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Chris, we've been going for a while now. Let's start to wind down. And I have a couple questions for you before the rapid fire round.
I'm ready.
So imagine that all information on Earth is lost. You get to save the works of 3 teachers. They can be books, podcasts, videos, whatever you want. Who would you choose and why?
Oof, wow, that's a tough one. Well, I think I would definitely have to include Dr. Sato. He's my sensei. He is the one who, you know, beautifully was the birth of everything that's come from KAATSU to BFR. It's definitely Dr. Sato. I have, ironically, a very good friend who is also a podcaster, not necessarily a biohacker like you. His name is Rich Roll. So Rich Roll, swam with him back in the day, and he's just a person who's been through a lot in his life. And I would definitely say him and his way of, he's a vegan, so I don't know if you're familiar with him. But yeah, I would include Rich. Hey, Rich. And probably the third, not a book, but would be my father. My father was a Vietnam vet, and mentored me, was probably my most important mentor. His name is Mike Morgan, so Michael Morgan.
I'm glad you got that mentorship. Chris, where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about KAATSU or work with you, or how can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, so at www.kaatsu.com, I am the Chief Aquatic Officer because I do teach a lot of people how to use KAATSU in the water because I have a swimming background. So from an Olympian to somebody who simply wants to do aqua walking, my information is on there. And also through our Instagram, we're just on Instagram, we're at KAATSU Global. And I'm one of the people who responds to the messages on there. So real easy to find me.
Okay. If there was a burning of the books and you could only keep one book, what would it be?
Oof. Your book. No, I would, that's there's a lot of books out there. And I've read a lot of books, but
anything instrumental on your views, your perception, your work?
Yeah, I think this is probably unfair because it's kind of an obscure book. But one of my mentors when I lived in Switzerland was a gentleman from the French-speaking part of Switzerland. So this is a shout out to him. You kind of caught me off guard. But his name is Jean-Pierre Egger, and he is, I would actually consider him kind of an original biohacker, even though this was back, in the early 2000s that I met him. And he was incredibly innovative on strength training. I'll actually hook you up with some stuff. Unfortunately, it's in French. But I think you would appreciate, and we could have a conversation offline. So it was a book by Jean-Pierre Egger about how to train and how to get stronger, and really outside of the box thinker.
I love those.
Yeah.
I'm excited to dig into that.
Yeah, no, I'll link you up with that.
Okay. Chris, what's something the KAATSU tribe doesn't know about you?
Oof. Okay. I mean, this is embarrassing. I'm a when I'm not, I collect comic books, and I have since I was 6 years old. So I'm a comic book fan. Marvel and DC. People ask me, and I'm like,
both.
Aquaman and Namor. You name it. So yeah, I'm a Marvel DC fan.
I see, and now I understand why your background is blurred.
Yeah, I got a bunch of comic books back there.
Yeah. Well, Chris, any final thoughts, any takeaways for our audience today?
We really appreciate people like you who are outside of the box thinking, who want to learn from us. We're still learning every day. So, we look forward. we'll field any question. And if one of us doesn't have it, we always share with each other, reach out to forward thinkers like you. And we love to collaborate with everyone. So, for us, it's about building a foundation of people like you and moving forward together.
My favorite companies are the ones that interact and engage with the audience and are open to discussion. So
we're just at the cusp of learning. So we want to learn more.
Yeah. So Chris, thank you for your time today. It's been fun talking about the future of KAATSU, your background, and diving into this exciting world of the future of fitness and more than fitness, recovery as well, and rehab and overall physical and mental optimization.
Right. For sure.
I'm Nick Urban here with Chris Morgan, signing out from mindbodypeak.com. Have a great week and be an outlier. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please